Hey folks, welcome back for another build video. This time around it's about breaking hearts and intimidating someone perfectly. So ever since they nerfed the Intimidate talent, I have been trying to put together a build that still makes use of Intimidate with the new way that they've structured it. So for those of you who don't know, Intimidate used to be an instantaneous talent where as soon as you were within 10 meters of an enemy, while you had bonus armor, your weapon damage was amplified by a set percentage, which was 35% for the normal version and 40% for the perfect variant of Intimidate. Whereas now, as you can read there, Intimidate is a building talent where you get a stack each second up to a maximum, and your weapon damage is increased by 5% per stack. So those maximum percentages haven't changed. It's still 35% for the normal variant, 40% for the perfect variant. But the problem now is, especially on the perfect variant of this talent, you have to have bonus armor for 8 seconds to get the max weapon damage amplification. And it recently occurred to me, we now have this lovely gear set where weapon hits on pulsed enemies add stacks of bonus armor. So I thought, well, let's put together a build centered around those two ideas and see how it works. So starting off with the specialization, we've gone with Technician to get access to both the Artificer Hive and the linked laser pointer, which automatically pulses enemies that we're aiming at. For our primary weapon, we've gone with the Rock and Roll Shotgun, which has the Perfectly Extra talent. As a general disclaimer, since Rock and Roll is a Dark Zone exclusive, the key piece here isn't the Perfectly Extra talent on the Rock and Roll, it's the fact that it is an ACS 12 variant, which is a very high rate of fire shotgun. So as long as you have one of those, you can absolutely make this build work. On top of that, and as a side note, quite honestly, an ACS 12 with Flatline might actually be a better shotgun to go with. It's just not one that I had access to, and I think Rock and Roll works really well. If you have access to it, that plus 50% magazine capacity does feel really great. Speaking of Flatline, for our secondary weapon, I've gone with a Carbine 7 with Flatline rolled in that talent slot. And for our sidearm, we have the Busy Little Bee with the Busy Little Bee talent to help us buff that weapon damage a little bit more whenever we want to switch to it. For our mask, we have our first piece of Heartbreaker. I'll go ahead and run through all the relevant parts of it now. That 2-piece bonus of plus 15% assault rifle damage is used by our secondary weapon. The LMG damage goes unused, but the 3-piece bonus of 15% weapon handling is also nice for all of the weapons that we're using. And then at 4 pieces, we have that all-important Heart Stopper talent. Headshots apply pulse for 5 seconds. That's great, but not something we're really going to be aiming for. The more important part there is that weapon hits on pulsed enemies add a stack of plus 1% bonus armor and plus 1% damage to pulsed enemies, up to a max of 50 stacks. And it's important to note that with shotguns in particular, each individual pellet counts as a weapon hit. So every time you pull the trigger, you're getting multiple weapon hits on a pulsed enemy, building those stacks incredibly fast, which is why we've gone with a shotgun here as our primary as opposed to something like an SMG or even the assault rifle. On top of that, we have critical hit damage and critical hit chance in our mod slot just to try and build our damage as much as possible. For our backpack, we have the Matador, which is the named Walker Harrison Co. backpack that sports the Perfect Adrenaline Rush talent. So after all that fancy talk about Heartbreaker, I went ahead and included another way to get yourself bonus armor. Whenever you're within 10 meters of an enemy, you're going to gain 23% bonus armor for 5 seconds, and that stacks up to 3 times. At the end of the day, there are definitely other talents you could go with here, but I couldn't resist going with that classic pairing of Adrenaline Rush and Intimidate that seemingly everyone had back in the day before they nerfed Intimidate. And on top of that, there is some lovely synergy here between Adrenaline Rush and Intimidate. There's a reason why everyone used to run it. You have to be within 10 meters to get that damage amplification from Intimidate anyway, so why not give yourself some bonus armor while you're at it with Perfect Adrenaline Rush. If you don't have the Matador here, the normal variant of Adrenaline Rush is going to work almost nearly as well, so don't sweat it. If you're looking to put this build together, either variant will work. And here we have the piece that we waxed poetically about in the intro. It's Hunter Killer, the named Golan Gear chest piece with Perfect Intimidate. As you can read there, while you have bonus armor, you gain stacks up to a max of 40% weapon damage to enemies within 10 meters. So this is definitely going to be a very close and personal build. If you don't have Hunter Killer, you can definitely just use Intimidate on a different chest piece. If you're not tied into the perfect version, Golan Gear with its plus 10% status effects probably isn't the brand to go with. If you're just using a normal Intimidate, I would suggest either Badger Tough to get that plus 10% shotgun damage, or you could go with Fenris Group to buff the Carbine 7's damage, or you could go with either Grupo Sombra or Seska Varoba to get some crit hit damage or crit hit chance respectively. All of those are perfectly fine options and should feel very similar to the build that you see pictured here. But obviously, I had access to Hunter Killer, so I'm absolutely going to put it on this build to see how well it works with that max 40% weapon damage. On top of that, we have crit hit damage, crit hit chance, and crit hit chance in the mod slot. As always, whether you go crit hit chance or crit hit damage in your mod slot is going to be down to your own particular math. So make sure you run those numbers and get the right ratio for your particular build. For our gloves, we have our second piece of Heartbreaker. We have that armor core down there, and then we've rolled crit hit damage in the attribute slot. So obviously we're sporting a lot of armor cores on this build, as you can see. And while running a tier 6 shield does feel pretty fantastic, if you get Heartbreaker pieces that already have crit hit damage or crit hit chance on the piece, you could absolutely roll the core attribute to weapon damage to increase the output of your shotgun and your assault rifle. I went ahead and kept the armor cores just because it was easier to put together, and it makes that plus 1% bonus armor from Heartstopper that much more impactful. But if you want a more weapon focused build, I would absolutely recommend rolling some of these armor cores to weapon cores. For our holster, we have our third piece of Heartbreaker. And here we've also gone with an armor core and crit hit chance, and that's present on both the holster and the knee pads. As I mentioned before, whether you go crit hit chance or crit hit damage here is going to be down to your own specific math. Again, the basic rule is get as close to that 60% cap as you can, and then add crit hit damage on top of that. For the build you see here, we're sporting about 56% crit hit chance and 90% crit hit damage. For our skills, we have the Artificer Hive and the Crusader Ballistic Shield. Even a tier 1 Artificer Hive is a great way to buff your shield whenever it gets damaged. Particularly that periodic drone release is going to refresh some of your shield health if it is damaged at the time. But this is a skill you could go a different way with. Obviously the Reviver Hive is another Hive variant that could work in this instance. But the more critical skill here is the Crusader Ballistic Shield. As I mentioned, because of both Intimidate and Adrenaline Rush, you're going to be within 10 meters of your targets for as long as you possibly can be. So this shield here is going to help you do that for even longer. And as a bonus, because you have your shield out, you're not going to be losing your bonus armor as fast, allowing you to keep that weapon damage up to its maximum at all times. And as I mentioned before, because of all those armor cores and the +1 skill tier from the Technician specialization, we are rocking a tier 6 shield, which has a lovely amount of max health and active regeneration. So that's this build, a way to try to salvage Intimidate even after they've nerfed it. Try it out, let me know what you think. Let me know if you have any other thoughts on how to keep your bonus armor up for 8 seconds and beyond. Personally, I found this was a great way to get yourself a lot of bonus armor and a lot of weapon damage. As always, like this video if you liked it, subscribe if you want to see more stuff like this, and continue to help our channel grow, and we will see you in the next one. Thank you so much for watching.
Ammunition. Practice. Additional hostile contacts. Detected. Near location. Guarded by hostiles. Incoming hostiles detected. Hostage health is critical.